One thing you mentioned in terms of unpacking things, and it's very interesting, you brought up apologetics. It's a fascinating thing because, as we know, fundamental theology, which you teach, and all of us have great interest in and have worked in and written in, back in the day, it was called apologetics. And it was because apologetics was viewed as this adversarial kind of thing that we said, let's not. But with what we were talking about a little earlier in this discussion, you're calling for kind of a renewed appreciation for, for lack of a better phrase, let's say an authentic, holistic apologetics that is not specified by confrontation, but is both with that love and those fear elements coming together. Is that also not part of what you were saying earlier about kind of like, and what I've called kind of like a fear of offending the subject? This renewed apologetics as a part of theology. That's a big thing, because Garrigou-Lagrange, Cardinal Dulles, and others in their works have pointed out that apologetics historically was never something separated from the work of sacred theology. So could you say more? But that's very interesting. I was intrigued when you brought up apologetics.
Yeah, I do think it's an integral moment. I want to say, I can't remember exactly what it said, but I want to say it's even, one of your esteemed confreres, Yves Congar, he brings out at one point the image of the rebuilding of the temple in the book of Nehemiah, where of course they have to be rebuilding the walls, of the city of Jerusalem, at the same time that there are hostile parties on the land. And it says that as those who work in the temple, they're working with a trowel in one hand and a sword in the other. and this image actually gets appropriated, in the theological tradition as an image for the work of theology. Because on the one hand, you have to be positively constructing the edifice of theology, but at the same time, you also have to know that there are always in every age misunderstandings that are abroad, and that therefore have to be guarded against in that positive work of construction. I want to say that in the moment of a desire to embrace the world and to kind of affirm its positive values, there was a sense that sort of work didn't communicate the tonality of theology that we want, and therefore apologetics at least was dropped, reconceived. If I understand the history of it correctly, in point of fact, it was entirely eliminated from the theological curriculum between more or less the Council and the late 70s when it was restored. So it was, so for many, and then even then when it was restored, it had to be kind of reconceived in a more positive way. Now, I myself don't want a purely negative theology either, but I do think that that to admit that there can be a negative moment, that there has to be one eye on prevalent misunderstandings, and that's part of the work of theology, to be building the walls of the city with a sword in one hand and trowel in the other. Yeah, I think that's at least in terms of the great sweep of theology, that strikes me as the way most of the history of theology has done theology, and that maybe we do well to kind of recover that millennial consensus.